Hi, BookTube. You were expecting a Middlemarch meditation. I get it. This is all about the English weather in springtime, which is so unpredictable. You can plan something for, let's say, Saturday, and Saturday's weather might look fine, dry at least, but Sunday's weather looks glorious. And so you think to yourself, I know, I will just switch my Saturday thing over to Sunday. Well, that's not so easy, because suddenly there's a whole logistical nightmare to be worked out. And okay, well, if we do that, then this has to move here and I have to do this then. And no. And Middlemarch meditation became highly unlikely if I was also going to take advantage of the better Sunday weather. So I'm going to just do the relaxed catch-up video that I promised the last time that we spoke, and we'll do Middlemarch midweek, if that's okay. So we're just going to keep it relaxed today, talk about what I've been reading. I don't think I'm going to get time for tag questions. We're going to talk about War and Peace. Where is my copy? It's here. I'm just holding it up to camera, but also showing you the bookmark. So we're on page 500. And War and Peace it's delightful. It's delightful because it's lighter than I had remembered. Who would remember when they were 14 reading a book like that? I hardly knew what I was reading back then. To reread it now, I'm amazed at how light it is. And I don't mean that in a derogatory or a critical sense. I mean that you can be intimidated by a book like War and Peace because of its size. But if you are to actually go into the chapters, you realize that the stories themselves and the characters themselves belong to, well, the women and the men, when they're in society, will remind you very much of Jane Austen novels, and so will all their dialogue, except it'll be a bit darker with more intrigue, because this is Russian aristocracy, so there's often a lot of stuff going on that can only be seen by certain eyes and heard by certain ears. And then there, of course, are the battle scenes, which I think appeal and are written in a way that would appeal to a 19th century reader of adventure or war stories. They take individual young men and you follow them through their experience of a particular battle. And I found that really exciting when they covered the Battle of Austerlitz, which must have been a very confusing thing for the men on the ground, because the maneuvers that the Russians and the Austrians decided upon were easily foiled by Napoleon's troop movements. But that wasn't realized by the Russians or the Austrians. So when Tolstoy picks 3 or 4 soldiers, they're all Russian, and tracks their experience throughout the decisive day of that battle, you get very different experiences, and no one soldier really understands what has gone on, what has happened. And of course, the real news and follow-up about what happened at the battle doesn't get back to Russia properly at first. The Russians rejoice. They get news back saying that the battle was won. And so it takes society, especially in Moscow, a little while to realize, no, that's not quite right. And for the real news to start trickling back, because the soldiers take a while to come back, and then they all have to tell their individual stories. It's fantastic because it's a great show of character. In particular, there is a wonderful scene where the adjutant to General Kutuzov is sent to give a set of orders to a particular captain who's looking after the gunners. And this adjutant comes upon the scene, and of course he stands back. He doesn't go right in because he can see that the guns are under direct fire from Napoleon's guns. And he just watches the commander of that company moving constantly, giving his men encouragement, making sure that there are replacements, because of course they're all being hit by cannon fire. So he's losing men, he's losing horses, he's trying to move the heavy equipment as best he can to get some of the guns to a better location so they can fire back on the French. And the adjutant is watching all this strenuous effort and complete dedication to the job. And I think it brought tears to my eyes, because the captain himself was very self-effacing. He didn't seek glory. And when you compare his story to other commanders that Tolstoy follows for that day, you see some very different behavior. You see some buffoonery, you see some cowardice. but with this captain you saw bravery and dedication to duty, and it was really inspiring. And I think that's what you'll find. The book was very easy to read. So if anybody's been afraid of it, thinking, oh, look at the size of it, don't worry about the size. Read it slowly, because each chapter is short and it's a delightful little insight into one character's experience of a particular event. Now we'll talk about the books that I bought in Hay on Wye. Not very many, and they're very obscure for the most part. I didn't know these authors or the works for the most part. I just pulled them off, and there's something about them that attracted me, so I went ahead and bought them. And that's particularly true with this first book that I'm going to hold up to camera. So it's called God's Bits of Wood and the name is in, I tried to watch a lot of YouTube videos to make sure I pronounced this name correctly, but got it in the right order. But I believe the first name was Ousmane and the surname is Sembene. And he is a Senegalese film director as well as novelist. He died in 2007, and he's been called the father of African film. And I didn't know anything about that, of course. When I picked this book, I simply looked at the spine and saw, okay, I like that title. I don't know that author. Sounds African. That was the best I guess. Pulled it out, read the back cover, realized on the back cover that it's part of a series, an African writers series. And I thought, oh, okay, good. Because if I get a hold of that series, if I look that up on Google, it'll lead me to some other formative and important African authors. And I've talked about, haven't I, my gaps in American history, right? I have gaps. I have bits that I know, and then I have sort of little sinkholes. Well, if we talk about African history, basically the whole of African history is a gap with tiny dots, just little pinpricks of knowledge that I have about particular places and particular people and particular times. And so there's just loads. Africa is like a treasure trove. When would I ever need to stop reading in order to find out more? And I just felt this book sounds like a good start. It concerns strike action in Senegal. And so I want to read more, and I'll share that with you when I go through it. Really excited to read this one. Okay, next one I owe thanks to Gareth, Book, Songs and Other Magic. Gareth, you finally got me to do it. I bought myself John Wyndam's The Chrysalids, and it's got a penguin logo. I trust penguin logos. They sort of say, this book has done well enough that we've even noticed. Because you know what people are like. Science fiction and fantasy are the genres. They don't get the respect that they should sometimes. People kind of sideline them until the overwhelming response by readers is such that they have to think, okay, maybe we should look. So this is obviously managed to win that kind of recognition. And I need a short science fiction because I'm still getting back into it in my reading. But I'm looking forward to that, Gareth. Looking forward to reading that. Next, we have nonfiction. This is quite a heavy tome. I'll hold it up. It's D.J. Taylor, The Prose Factory. And then the subtitle is Literary Life in England Since 1918. So it's covering that period when modernism began and then led into postmodernism. And I must admit that at the Open University, they kind of skimped on that bit of literary history. You kind of got, again, I have gaps. And this book seemed to cover that whole period from a literary criticism point of view. What was happening, what was selling, what were writers doing, and why were they doing it? And so I think that's going to fill me in and could be quite useful if I then read titles by the authors concerned. I mean, it lists all the authors it's going to talk about. G.K. Chesterton, Virginia Woolf, Hugh Walpole, J.B. Priestley, T.S. Eliot, Edith Sitwell, who else? George Orwell, Anthony Powell, William Empson, Iris Murdoch, Kingsley Amis, Malcolm Bradbury, John Kerry, David Lodge, A.S. Byatt, Margaret Drabble, Ian Hamilton. Lots of authors there that I could then move on to and read some of their works after reading that book. So yeah, D.J. Taylor, looking forward to that. Next, this one will be familiar. Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. This is one of the angry young men working class English writers who were coming up with new drama and poetry and prose in the late 50s, early 1960s. So this is one of the, I was going to buy a lot more. There was a whole section in the Hay Cinema bookshop devoted to 20th century stage plays. And so, yeah, there were a lot of scripts. And I thought, calm down. You know what you're like. If you buy a whole lot of them, most of them will sit on the bookshelf and rot, and you'll read one. So I thought, well, then just buy one and read it. So I thought, well, this one is, everyone recognizes that title. So I thought I need to get that under my belt. I need to become familiar with that play. Another nonfiction, and this was the only brand new book that I bought while I was in Hay, when I was in Richard Booth's store, because they sell new fiction as well as, or new books as well as secondhand books. And that was Monsters by, let's not cover up her name, Claire Dederer. And I love the subtitle, What Do We Do with Great Art by Bad People? And that's a subject I'm still interested in. I mean, I made one video on it that was neither here nor there. I don't think much of it as a work of philosophy. And I still want to have more thoughts about that, because the problem won't go away. It will still be there. And I'm realizing now that some of the authors that are dead and gone were very problematic in their day, and yet I'm reading their stuff and I'm thinking, I need a way to look at this. Maybe Claire has got some insights on that I haven't thought of, or I haven't seen anybody else mention on YouTube. And finally, this was me digging around in amongst, there are a lot of hardbacks at Hay on Wye that seem to date from the 1920s through to maybe the beginning of the Second World War, sort of 20s to 40s. You know, these kind of hardbacks, lovely old books, you know, that have been were sitting on somebody's bookshelves. And many of them are writers who were popular in their day, whose fame hasn't lasted. It's evaporated. And this is an example, and you're going to love the title. So let me try and hold up the spine. So it is The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe, and that BT is barrister. So The Terrible Hobby of Sir Joseph Londe, Barrister, by E. Phillips Oppenheimer. Now that author, in the 1930s, the number of books that they were selling, they wrote over 100 novels. And it's astounding, because I don't know about you, but I'm like, who? Who is this? But they were well known as a popular writer. Their stories tended to involve adventure and espionage, a la John Buchan, that kind of thing. And I thought, I was attracted mainly by the title. I just thought, that is such a title. The Terrible Hobby. What on earth can it be? Do they collect poison stamps or something? You know, what? Or I don't know, flowers that are, you know, plants that are poisonous. What kind of hobby can somebody have? You think of the little things that we all do. I don't know, poison needles, and they do cross stitch with them or something. Maybe Meg would like that idea. I don't know. Meg, this book actually did make me think of you, because it's just so sweet and so weird and so vintage. And I thought, what is this story about? So I'm going to read it purely for fun, because it looks like it will be for fun. It looks like that's what it was read for, a bit of light escapism. And that's it, everybody. I was going to do some tag questions as well, but I thought, no, this video is going to get super long then. I'll do that in May sometime. You'll get a couple of tag videos, because I'll probably need the time just to either prep videos, maybe I need to get an extra Middlemarch meditation done, because I just realized you will only have had one in April. So maybe I'll have to try and work something in. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out in May. Anyway, everybody have a great time, whatever you're reading, and look forward to seeing you again in a few days' time. Take care. Bye-bye.